Hello friends, welcome to the EduSat Network. Our today's topic of discussion is changing modes of worship in India, and for this discussion we have this in our studio, our subject expert Dr. Shankar Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Hindu College, University of Delhi. He has a teaching experience of nearly 2 decades and his published books include Concise Social Sciences, published in 2006 by Frank Brothers and Company, and another book along with Jaya Tyagi is Indian History and Culture, published in 2013. And with this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Sir to our EduSat studio and request him to begin our today's lecture. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you, Urvashi, and good morning, viewers. We shall today be talking about a very interesting theme in Indian culture and history, and that happens to be changing modes of worship in India. Of course, the overriding perspective would be somewhat historical, partly because of my own training in this subject, and partly because we need to have historical insight in order to have a dynamic understanding of worshipping as a tradition, worshipping as a phenomena which underwent significant changes over different periods of time in history. The influence that the changing society and culture had over the modes of worshipping in Indian history, diversity in the modes of worship. There is some kind of a resistance to present worshipping as a unilinear, monolithic kind of tradition. In fact, the sheer diversity of lifestyle, economic pursuits, cultural varieties do compel us to accord variety to the modes of worship at the same point of time in history. So different areas of India had people surviving at different levels of historical development, and their religion and their modes of worship had manifestations in ways which cannot be understood in plural, in singular sense. So plurality is something which we need to take care of while embarking on a theme like this. Now, we have structured this discussion in 2 parts, primarily because we would be talking about it right from the earliest times of collective life and manifestation of religion and worshipping down to the present times. Therefore, we need to take care of a huge chronological span while discussing this. And very broadly, if one were to talk about the skeletal framework, then we can say with the advantage of the hindsight that we have today, worshipping can be understood so far as Indian context is concerned if we take the prehistoric past as one chronological bracket, then that will call for a discussion in a different mode. Subsequent, our discussion will use these chronological categories. We would be first talking about the prehistoric context, and then come to the almost the terminal point of prehistoric context, in the sense that while we talk about Neolithic times, which is the period when agriculture and domestication of animals had made its beginning, and settled permanent life had come to stay, had come to get institutionalized. At that point of time, there is some bit of a change in the mode of worshipping. So these are the 2 sub brackets that we would be talking of in the prehistoric context. Subsequent to prehistoric past, we have a brief kind of presence in the form of Bronze Age civilization in Indian subcontinental context, and that is Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, which of course was a fairly well developed, advanced urban kind of a civilization, and premised primarily on agriculture and with fair degree of share from non-agricultural or commercial trade pursuits. So that calls for a different kind of understanding of the manifestations of religiosity or worshipping traditions and so forth. And then when we come to the subsequent period, that is the Vedic times, of course, the dominant understanding of the Vedic period is not in terms of some kind of a continuous trajectory from the Harappan times. Of course, there are historians who argue to the contrary and would like to believe that there is no discontinuity between Harappa and Vedic, or maybe that the architects are the same and so forth. So without getting into that, we would, since our theme, since our focus is on modes of worshipping, definitely the Vedic times, the Vedic lifestyle presents us with a different kind of visualization of gods and goddesses, and modes of worship also was somewhat distinct, although in the absence of written records or deciphered records of Harappan civilization, we don't have fair degree of clarity about how actually worshipping as a collective or individual act was transacted. What was the thought behind it? What was the mindset? So we can't enter into these domains in the absence of written records for Harappan times. But for the Vedic times, of course, given the kind of sources that we have, that is Rig Veda and subsequently the other three Vedas, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda, and several other texts like Aranyaks and Brahmanas and so forth, we do have a fair bit of insight into the way people thought about their gods, goddesses, and the way it was transacted. So Vedic period, Rig Veda and later Vedic times gives us another chronological bracket in which the mode of worship is to be understood as one unit. Of course, it does undergo some kind of a change with respect to early Vedic and later Vedic, but that constitutes one chronological bracket. Subsequent to the Vedic period, or the moment we enter into the first or second half of the first millennium BC, say around 600, 500 BC, that is the period when we are confronted with a different kind of understanding, with a different kind of mode of worshipping, which is a kind of departure from the earlier tradition of Vedic gods, goddesses, thoughts, and the thought processes beneath these rituals and modes of worshipping. This is not only from within the Brahmanical tradition, but even outside it, those who were opposed to the Brahmanical tradition of worshipping. For instance, the sudden efflorescence of several heterodox sects, Buddhism, Jainism, Ajivikas, and so forth, all included, they also betray some kind of a thought process which is a little bit different from the Vedic mode of worshipping. And from within the Brahmanical tradition itself, say in the tradition of the Upanishads, we again are confronted with something which is broadly, of course, it does not violate the principles of Vedic devotion and so forth to specific gods and goddesses, but definitely in terms of thought process, in terms of what actually goes beneath such rituals and practices, and the way worshipping is transacted, that had undergone a change within the Brahmanical tradition, as manifested in the literature called the Upanishads. So that gives us yet another chronological bracket in which we would be talking about the post-Vedic manifestations of religious practices as a separate category. And then towards the, we can say, towards the times that Puranas started getting written, so we can say 3rd century AD onwards, 3rd, 4th century AD onwards, we are again confronted with some kind of a drastic departure from within Brahmanism, of course, but this kind of departure is leading to the rise of new gods and goddesses which were earlier either not very prominent or absent altogether in the Vedic pantheon of gods and goddesses, but they become very prominent and important in the Gupta and post-Gupta period. And the underlying theme behind such change or this departure in the mode of worshipping is sought to be understood by sociologists and historians in a context which is different from that of the earlier practices. So that calls for a separate treatment so far as the Puranic gods, goddesses and worshipping traditions are concerned. This will include the movement of bhakti, or as we understand it, bhakti andolan and so forth. So it was devotion premised worshipping that we are talking of. When we come to the period of, say, 13th century, 12th century, 13th century AD, we are basically talking of the times when Delhi Sultanate had come into being in North India, and subsequently it started making inroads into the Deccan and southern parts of India as well. We are now again witnessing some kind of a change, of course, which is very obvious in the sense that the Turkish invaders who had come to establish Delhi Sultanate came from a different tradition of Islam, which was a Semitic religion, quite contrast to the kind of Brahmanical Hinduism that we were socialized with, and that had different flavor and different thought process, and since they existed and the two streams coexisted, it gave rise to several new traditions and also the forces of syncretization. So coming together of two distinct traditions and flourishing of separate traditions, say Sufism and so forth in India, which of course had quite a prominent sense of syncretization and give and take of both the religions and several practices of several sects from within these traditions. Now, subsequent to it, since it is part of the Semitic religion, of course, it was a congregational aspect which was very prominent here in Islamic tradition in the Sultanate as well as the Mughal period. And subsequent to the decline of Mughal period and coming of the British and the kind of education, the kind of exposure to the principles of individualism, liberty, and so forth, a different kind of and the element of scientificity, so that gave a different kind of push to religious practices, and we find that in the modern times it tended to become more and more individualized as opposed to the congregational kind of spirit that characterized worshipping traditions and practices in the pre-modern times. So nowadays it is more more in the sense of faith, personal devotion, and personalized gods and so forth. So there are threads of bhakti, there are threads of Sufism, there is thread of individuality, there is so all these things accorded a different character to religiosity and modes of worshipping in India up to the present times. So what we have discussed so far is the separate chronological brackets that we would be using while talking about the changing modes of worship. Now, again, before we start talking from the initial periods or early times, prehistoric times, let's also try to have a very broad idea in terms of perspectives with which the scholars approach a theme like this and account for it. So it is also coming from one's training in a particular discipline. For instance, religion and religious practices have been sought to be understood by sociologists in ways which throw society or social solidarity or the importance of the collective called society into prominence. Most important of the works, one of the seminal works in this regard is that of Emile Durkheim, who talks basically, we are not getting into the details of what Durkheim had to say, but he did study Australian Aborigine tribes and the totemic beliefs and practices which characterized their religious behavior, and came to the conclusion that in essence such religions originate because they have to give value to the society on which they are dependent and to which they owe a lot. So an individual, in order to express or articulate one's obligation to the collective called the society, initiates worshipping of some symbols or totemic figures, and the thought beneath this is that they are in essence manifestations of society of which the individuals themselves are a part. So essentially what Durkheim is saying is that we worship society, individual worships society in the form of various symbols and totems and so forth. So one of the earliest manifestations of religious practices is sought to be understood by the sociologists with this sense, and of course there is some kind of an accentuation of the value of society and social solidarity here. Moving away from sociological treatment, we have say theologists and theologians who would be talking about the scriptural value and the obviously articulated intent and the embedded value that the details of the religion talk about. And of course, it has its value, but in terms of academic inquiry, we find that for the prehistoric religions, or if we take the perspective of exploring the origins of religions and prehistoric context, of course, with the unavailability of written records or scriptures, there is no way we can guess about the thought processes from theological point of view for the period for which written records are not available. So there is obvious limitation with which theologians can approach or apprehend the topic under discussion, particularly for prehistoric past. Then we have psycho-historical analysis of religious practices and modes of worshipping and so forth, where the individual illusions as an intellectual exercise, the issue of fear of seeing something which is either extremely spectacular or something which cannot be accounted for through common sense. So, psycho-historical accounts tend to locate the origins of religion and worshipping in such thought processes belonging to an individual, and it is the intellectual capacity or incapacity of people, of individual in past, which is sought to be understood in the context of religion and worshipping. So, these accounts talk in a different way or approach this theme in a different way altogether, and account for the changes that have been brought from the earliest times down to the present times through history. Now, apart from that is the historical account itself, and history as a subject being not nomothetical, that is being not theory bound, since the very character of history as a discipline is ideographic. Therefore, it is contingent on the evidence and site findings and records which are available, and they might not always follow some kind of a unilinear pattern, and therefore we find that in the discipline itself plurality is inbuilt, because it is all predicated on different kinds of evidence that we have, and they may not always be weaved into some kind of a unilinear account or one trajectory in which these changes have occurred. In fact, there can be regressions, there can be parallel traditions which has very little to do with say the dominant paradigm of worshipping and so forth. So, historical account is something which is again little bit different from the sociological, theological, psycho-historical accounts, and it takes elements or explanations from all these existing accounts. So, whatever is suited, whatever accounts for a particular practice the best, is made use of in explaining or in understanding the kind of evidence that a historian is confronted with. So, we can say that historical account in a way tries to pull explanations from different disciplines in order to understand a particular religious behavior or mode of worshipping in past and also in present in its own way, and which just has to be historical and evidence wise concrete or verified. So, I think in this way the historical perspective of understanding the modes of worship is a better and more satisfactory way of understanding a theme like this. Now, having said this as a kind of detailed preface to what we are about to embark on, let's now think of the prehistoric context as we had outlined towards the beginning of our lecture. Now, when we are talking of prehistoric past, we are talking of a lifestyle and subsistence pattern which is premised on hunting, gathering, scavenging, and mankind is primarily dependent on natural products and they themselves are not the producers of either maybe dairy products or agricultural products in various ways. So, in the pre-Neolithic or in the pre-agricultural, prehistoric past, we have manifestations of religion or worshipping tradition in ways which are a little bit different from the Neolithic times onwards. Now, let's understand this fact that man had started worshipping much before, when he started handling more complex ideas and phenomena. So, at the level of mind, the complexity of life that had entered into mankind's history is preceded by the practices which today can be understood in the context of religiosity or worshipping. So, of course, we are talking of very archaic times. We are talking of very simple times, and there at this stage we find that almost any object which has some kind of associational relevance with man's life, that could be an object of worship. Of course, in order to account for such practices, historians and people from other discipline traditions tend to believe that it must have been a kind of fear of having seen something, of having been unable to account for something which is either spectacular or dangerous, which induces fear, or even maybe of extreme helpfulness to their life. And that could have accounted for some kind of illusions. So, through the means of illusion and triggered by fear, mankind started worshipping some objects. Usually, the candidates chosen for worshipping happened to be natural objects, of course, because man had still not created or there wasn't much of an artificiality in man's life, and they are associational because they are only thinking of those things that are directly observable by mankind. So, it could be a stone, it could be a mountain, it could be an animal, it could be a reptile, it could be a plant, it could be almost anything over and beneath Earth's surface, and that is the object of worship at around this time, that is in the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, or we can say pre-Neolithic, prehistoric past. And there are several examples that we can cite from ancient Indian history itself, prehistoric history, but by and large the practices can be accounted for in this fashion. By the time we reach the Neolithic period, or the period where agriculture had started making its entry into man's life and subsistence pattern, then we have of course the objects could be natural and they could be deified in ways which were continued from the earliest times, but there seems to be a special focus on certain powers of nature. Those powers can be understood with reference to the ability of objects to fertilize, and it is the fertility cult which gets accentuated in agrarian societies, and fertility rituals and objects displaying the power to procreate, they become the objects of deification, alongside several other prehistoric traditions that continued from the earlier times. So, if you take the case of Mehergarh, which gives us the earliest evidence of Neolithic settlement in Indian subcontinent, which is in present day Pakistan, we find that from the pre-Harappan layers itself, we start getting evidence of the terracotta figurines of mother goddesses. Now, this mother goddess is a typical object which was made, of course, in human form. So, it is anthropomorphic in that way, and a departure from earlier practice. But what is worshipped, what is deified, what is celebrated here is the ability of the females to procreate and to give birth to new ones. And in the Mehergarh context, or in the pre-Harappan context, we get a very interesting finding where a terracotta figurine of mother goddess is depicted, and from the womb of the mother goddess we have a tree or a plant sprouting. Now, this is a curious mix of the vegetative procreation, ability of the mother earth ability of earth to procreate in terms of growth of plants and trees, and the females who give birth to the new ones, the children, and both are merged in terms of identity, and therefore the level of mother goddess. So, the motherness of human life is attributed also to earth, and that is how earth becomes a mother. So, it is a transfer of identity here taking place in such depictions, and we find that usually such depictions are very typical of agricultural societies. In pre-agricultural societies, we do not have such depictions of mother goddesses, and that tells us about the associational circumstances in which such worshipping traditions are born of. And if we take the detour of Indian history, then of course subsequent to the Neolithic experience at Mehergarh, we get to have in the same area the coming up of a very advanced Bronze Age civilization in the name of Harappan civilization, or as we understand it in the form of Indus Valley civilization. Here, of course, the civilization is predicated on agriculture in association with several other non-agricultural pursuits like artisanship, trade and commerce and so forth. It was having lot many urban centers apart from the rural hinterland and other kinds of rural settlements. But here we also get to see through the Harappan seals, we find trees and people in some kind of a meditative posture sitting beneath it. There are animals depicted, and historians do argue that it could be something which is a manifestation of their religiosity. It could be part of the shamanic tradition. It could be part of some divinity associated to animals or trees. There are some strange creatures peeping through the tree branches as depicted in these seals. So some historians also think of spirits, ghosts and issues like that, which could have given some kind of a contour to the religious thought processes of the Harappans. And but since they are just depictions, and in the absence of any detailed account, written account, belonging to the period, we can only make some guess about as to how this could have been in the context of the civilizational life of Harappa. And various historians talk of the possibility of such manifestations as we discussed in the seals of Harappa, as manifestations of some shamanic tradition, some medicine man, or maybe some spirits to ward off evils, or even some malevolent or benevolent spirits, or there are claims like such depiction where a person is sitting almost in the yogic posture beneath a tree surrounded with beasts. So it could be proto Shiv, because Shiv subsequently came to be associated with the lord of beasts, and the kind of environment that is given in this depiction quite matches with that of subsequently popular Shiv tradition of worshipping and so forth. Therefore, such claims are there, but they are unverified claims. And in the context of plural lifestyle, all we can say is that there could be several traditions of worshipping in the Harappan times, some reminiscent of the previous periods to which Harappan civilization does owe some kind of a lineage, particularly with the researches around Mehergarh. It is now sitting on a very solid platform that there is some kind of anteriority in the same area in which Harappan civilization grew. So this is one, and there is scope of variety in or plurality in religious traditions in the Harappan times, of course because of the plurality of lifestyle and circumstantial evidence and requirements of lifestyle. So pastoralists are coexisting with agrarian societies, and the professional entities are also coming up. So it's it could have a variety of religious practices, and what was dominant and what was the mainstream religious practice is something that we are only speculating about in the context of Harappa because of the absence of written records belonging to this period. And when we come to the subsequent phase, as we had outlined towards the beginning of our discussion, that happens to be the Vedic phase. Now, in terms of chronology, it is the time accorded to this is around 1500 BC onwards, and terminates in a period, say, around 600 BC. It includes the changes that were brought about during the early Vedic period or the Rig Vedic period, which is again 1500 BC to 1000 BC roughly, and from there on there is a little bit of a departure, depending again on the circumstantial or associational circumstances of the lifestyle of the Vedic people. Now, what we have here is that in terms of unilinear progression of history, as we said in the beginning, this Vedic life that we get to see from around 1500 BC presents us with a kind of situation which, from unilinear point of view, appears to be an aberration. So this is some kind of a regression. So from a developed city civilizational life, we have a lifestyle which is predominantly pastoral, with little bit of agriculture, which gradually makes inroads, and by the time we come to the later Vedic times, agriculture has almost replaced pastoralism as the predominant mode of subsistence or lifestyle. So here what we find is again the natural forces that we talked of in the pre-agrarian context of prehistory, almost situation quite akin to that. Of course, there was a difference in the sense that in terms of abstract ideas, this was a very, we can say, advanced system where anthropomorphic gods start appearing, and they are given human form, and therefore in the Rig Vedic period we find gods like Indra, Agni, Varun, who all are given human form, but they depict, they are treated as humans, although there is no direct depiction in human form, but their attributes are understood as if they were human beings, and essentially they stand for something else, and that is the power of nature, power of a specific force of nature. For instance, Indra is a god of thunder and thunder and lightning. So that was something probably that people could not account for or could not understand, and therefore started worshipping it on account of fear or illusion, fear and through the means of illusion. Because when we talk of illusion, of course, we are talking of various means by which they get worshipped. Similarly, Agni, as the name itself suggests, is symbolizing the power of fire. Varun symbolizes the power of changing seasons and water. So this is how in the Rig Vedic times we get to see the religiosity getting depicted and manifested in Rig Veda, and the dominant mode through which this is worshipped, or these deities are worshipped, is through sacrifice. So this is again a very direct kind of transaction between man and God, without involving fair degree of complexity. These are simple ways and means. We expect something from God in material terms, and we give back to God in obligation something which is again material. So you sacrifice something, some object, it could be animate, it could be inanimate. You sacrifice something, through fire it goes to God, and the God becomes happy, propitiated, and they give back something that you desire for. So this is a kind of direct transaction here that we get to see in the early part of Vedic tradition. And of course, with the increased inroads made by agriculture and vegetational issues and so forth, by the time we read Atharva Vedic references and so forth, we do find that situation is somewhat changing. So there is fair degree of diversity here. The ecology in which such religious activities are happening are a little bit different from the Rig Vedic context. So we have now black magic, we have witchcraft, we have jadoo tona, we have forest rituals, we have some trees becoming important on account of their medicinal value and hence deified, and given and they are again woven into the mythology, Vedic mythology, that is given some human attribute or devilish attribute or divine attribute and so forth. So this gives us a flavor of a society which is located in forest areas, and their gods also reside here, so it seems, and the religiosity and the religious practices are born of the circumstantial familiarity with the things in which they were transacting their lives. So this is about the later Vedic period, and the next major departure that we get to see in Indian history, and of course it happens to be recorded, therefore we have greater clarity in terms of the changing modes of worship and the details of it, and that comes at around the middle of the first millennium BC, around 6th century, 5th century BC. 6th century, 5th century BC, even otherwise from historical point of view, some historians regard it as the axial period of ancient Indian history. This is because it is a transforming century. It is transforming century because the landscape had changed, economy had changed, polity had changed, and so did the religiosity. So if you look at the map of Indian subcontinent in 6th century BC and compare it with the earlier times, say of the times of the Vedic or later Vedic period, we find that there are more locations which are dotted on the map, and that tells us about increased habitation, and there are new cities and towns coming up, and that had a lifestyle which is different from the ruralized kind of environment in which the Vedic practices were born, the Brahmanical practices were born. And these contexts are supplemented by another change in the economy, and that is agriculture had come to be very dominant mode in economic pursuits. Trade and commerce had become extremely important. Coins make entry into the Indian history for the first time in this century, punch-marked coins made of silver. There are references to long caravans of traders crisscrossing various important trade routes identified as Uttarapath and Dakshinapath. There are new ideas emerging which are not always consistent with the Brahmanical mode of religiosity, and it is a very different times, it seems. It is a transformed times. The landscape has changed. In terms of polity, we again find territorial states are coming up in a big way. We get to hear of 16 Mahajanapadas around this time. So these are the kings who are different from the kings of the Vedic and later Vedic period. They are despotic kings with huge territories and resources on account of agriculture, trade, commerce, and other occupational and artisanal activities under their command. They are taxing it. So the revenue generated by the territorial states are enormously different from that which were generated in the later Vedic times or early Vedic times. So this king of 6th century BC, 5th century BC is a more despotic king with a lot of resources under their command. And we have urban life, we have trades and trade and commercial people, we have coins and so forth. All these things had given rise to a kind of lifestyle which is different, and hence the circumstances had become drastically altered, and this generated a kind of response which is manifested in the religiosity of the people reflected. If we talk of the Brahmanical tradition, then within the Brahmanical tradition we have the Upanishads, which talk of the religiosity of people in ways and means which are again drastically different from Vedic and later Vedic practices. And from outside Brahmanism, from outside the pale of Brahmanism, we have several non-conformist traditions taking shape in the form of social movements, say Buddhism, Jainism, or Ajivikas. They all make their presence felt for the first time here in 6th century BC, and talk of visualizations, talk of religiosity in ways which are different from the early Vedic times. So, the morality, the ethics, they all get transformed because of the circumstantial changes, and probably we would be able to map these changes and from for the period henceforth, that is from 6th century BC onwards, maybe in the coming lecture that I shall be having with you the next day. So, that is it for the day. We have come up to 6th century BC, and from here on we will take it up for further discussion when I meet you next.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very lucid and clear presentation, and sir has already informed the viewers what we are going to be covering next. So, with this we would like to thank sincerely to sir for coming here and talking to us and sparing his valuable time, and I also thank the viewers for watching us. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, sir.